Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Garden Party, the world's most famous podcast.
Usually I start these conversations by asking everyone how they remember New York during a decade, but for the 2000s, obviously we all think of 9/11. And as the city began to recover from an unthinkable tragedy, the Knicks had a part to play.
I just think that sports is always like the saving grace when, especially when a city like collectively is going through such a tough moment. Sports can bring everyone together and just be so joyous and make us, not forget. Like, obviously we still to this day remember the tragedy of that day, but just bring us all together in a much more fun way.
Yeah, I definitely remember the first game back at the Garden, and the atmosphere was so different in the corridors, in the bowels of the Garden, guard dogs, heavy police presence. It was just a different atmosphere. And frankly, I found myself thinking at one point, because we were still not far removed from it, what happens if I get a note saying everybody has to evacuate, or if something, God forbid, happened with somebody, and then I said, okay, and we have to put our best foot forward, that kind of thing.
Mine's pretty crazy, and I'm not sure anybody even knows this, but we played the first game back in the Garden as a college. University of Florida was that preseason tournament they have every year.
Preseason NIT.
And I remember we went down, we had something down at the stock exchange, and this was, I don't even want to talk about stuff surrounding, but that area was still an absolute no-go. They had to have the police bring us in to even do the pre-event to the tournament. And then we had that game, and I'll remember it was the first time a lot of people came back to the Garden, and ours was the first game of the two. And pre-game, this is my freshman year of college, we walked survivors' families, firemen, the kids out on the court. All of us held hands. And it was one of the more emotional things I've been through on a basketball court, where you could just sense what that meant to everyone in the Garden. And made the game very emotional and energy packed. So it was that was my first real time coming to New York, and it was just after that it happened. We didn't even know if we were going to play the game or not, and ended up playing it.
I've lived in New York for 40 years. I was saying, actually was having coffee with a friend when I saw the first plane before it hit the building, and so we stood on the street looking at the Twin Towers for hours and hours. So big, huge event in my personal life, and of course in the large life of the city and of the world. And it felt for a while like I wasn't sure if it was okay for us to go in and like, what is a fashion show about? Like, who's going to wear stuff to a play where nothing really makes sense? So after 9/11, going to games, going to theater for me, took a while to kind of recalibrate.
After 9/11, the fans were great. We were just, not that we were nervous, but we just didn't know what to expect. And everybody's kind of, looking to the sides and stuff like that, and just saying, let's hope this all goes smoothly. I know I did. And no, but I'll say this, the Garden got back to normal pretty darn quickly, and the 2001-2002 season, that was the first time that the team had dropped off a little bit. In the 90s, we got to the second round of the playoffs, or better every year. And then 99-2000 went to the finals with Spree coming on board, and then 2000-2001 was a little more down. I mean, in the 90s, and not to go back into the 90s too much, but it was. I told my wife, if I'm working on Mother's Day, we're doing good. If I'm working on Father's Day, we're doing real good. And I missed a couple of Father's Days in there. Yeah.
The Knicks entered the 2000s led by all-stars Allen Houston and Latrell Sprewell, along with fan favorites Kurt Thomas and Marcus Camby. They reached the Eastern Conference Finals in 2000, beating the Heat once again in Patrick Ewing's final New York season. Jeff Van Gundy departed after a 14th straight New York playoff appearance in 2001, and the franchise embarked on a new era.
It was just a team in transition. I mean, in the early part of the decade, there was a lot of turnover in the coaching staff, different players who came in for a while. A lot of them were veteran players, some of them toward the tail end of their career. But the first 5 years of that decade were our front court was a little bit weaker than the back court in those years. But then, it was just that kind of decade. It was, and after the 90s, it was like basketball hangover at the Garden for a while. But I will say this, the attendance, and this is a tribute to New York fans, was tremendous. We were in the top 10, and I think you could look it up. We were in the top 10 in NBA attendance every year in the 2000s, and anywhere from 3rd to 9th or 10th.
I think we held on to the 90s a little bit. Like in the early 2000s, it was still recent enough in our memory where we could hold on to it. And the cast of characters was still there. They were older, they weren't the same. But when you see Spree and Houston on the court together, you see Camby, Kurt Thomas, they're not the same player, but you can imagine that maybe that chance is there. And like you were saying, like we'd see slivers of hope. And so we held on to that. Like we can get back to it.
We were shooting Sopranos and they were given, get the crazy offers that people would give. It's just insane. A lot of actors talk about this. Like when you're busted broke, you're, scrambling for every penny. As soon as you start making money, all the free stuff starts coming. So I was getting offered all this stuff, and one of which was a ticket to a basketball game. And I don't remember my first game, but I was like, basketball. I just didn't know. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what was about to hit me. And it has everything to do with being, on the court. Seeing these guys, you guys, and hearing and where I started to fall in love with the game. But that must have been probably between 2000, 2010. I forget when it is. But it was just beyond my wildest imagination. The game, learning about it, learning about the players. And it took me a while to recognize that the Knicks, it just means the team that plays in New York. That next year, it's not necessarily going to be the same players. I took that really hard. It's like, what about this guy? And then there's some other guy whose name I've never heard of. And I took it, I felt like a personal affront. I'm still having a hard time getting used to that. As all these trades are happening today, I'm like, no, you can't get rid of IQ. I'm sorry. That's not, nobody passed that by me. My son had been with me since he was a little kid. I don't know, 4 or something. He's now 19, and he's been coming to the games with me ever since. And, they come out with the T-shirts, which fly back. Right. And he was like, when are we going to sit back there? I was, and I see the guys up in the rafters, like the real fans, that probably have been sitting way up there for years and years. And I'm on a TV show and I get to sit on the court. It's crazy. It's crazy. And
to
sometimes
their credit,
it feels
they probably
a little...
had a lot of T-shirts though.
Yes.
Fans further in the back.
While we're on the subject, I do not have a single T-shirt, but that's beside the point.
We can raise, yeah.
I know Carmelo also because he was on Nurse Jackie. He did a scene with me. And I got to know Baron Davis for a while. They would recognize me sometimes. And I also didn't want to, I'm sort of shy in that way. I didn't want to, throw them off their game or whatever. But they feel, I swear to God, they feel like my kids. Like I get excited like I would if it was my son, you know what I mean? Out there doing this stuff. It's a little psychotic, my relationship with the team. But it feels sort of maternal, like how excited I get when they're doing well, how badly I feel if they, miss a foul shot or, I don't know.
Did you ever catch a bad pass sitting front row with the old Monsters? No.
I never did, not once.
Be careful what you wish for.
I caught Brunson. He was doing a 3-point from the sidelines there, and he threw it and kind of leaned back, and I just stood up and grabbed his back like this, and I steadied him. So
you kept him in bounds.
Yes, exactly right.
We get entertained watching you guys on the other side of the court, on those seats and on the baselines. So we're like, oh, look at Fat Joe. Look at this one. Look at that.
Crazy.
Oh, they're going crazy. Oh, because people sometimes come in and then they get whipped up in the course of the game.
Yeah,
and so that's our entertainment as well.
Oh, good.
In addition to
the players' entertainment. Don't think for one second the players don't know.
Oh yeah, they
are. You kidding?
At least in the big cities, New York, LA. I mean, you know who's at the game. Yeah. And if you don't know, you notice them while you're, oh my gosh, it's always interesting. And it's always also interesting to see when players will get somewhat nervous by who's in the crowd.
I was going to ask you.
No, really?
Yeah, it was, I've seen that in the past where guys will be like, oh man, that's like my favorite actor.
Oh no, that's terrible.
So some players see more than others, but But yeah, don't think for 1 second that the players aren't like, oh, Sopranos are here again. Oh, that's great.
Because they certainly let on that they don't see anything.
An early defining moment of the decade came in September 2000 when the Knicks traded franchise icon Patrick Ewing to Seattle. Ewing was 38 and had been limited by injuries for several seasons. New York fans had mixed emotions about his departure.
Yeah, that was tough. That felt like Ewing should have been in a Knicks uniform until his absolute final day. That was tough. I think we owed him that to just see him through until he wanted to leave, you know?
Totally. He was misunderstood by some of the fans because he wasn't overly effusive. But he's a great guy. And he got banged up in the later years, but he had that baseline 12 to 15 footer.
Unstoppable.
And he could elevate. And it was like when he shot it up, I was already on the mic. I flipped up the switch and my breath was up. And in the last couple of years, his health, his knees and stuff, he lost a little elevation on the shot. The shot became a little more, a little less consistent.
Yeah.
But he always gave everything, and he sweated more than any player in 35 years. When he came by, I almost put a towel in front of the thing. It's really pretty funny.
The Knicks hired former Pistons star and Pacers coach Isaiah Thomas as president in 2003. He would also coach the team from 2006 to 2008. The Thomas era was personified by players like Stephon Marbury, along with promising draft picks like Channing Frye, Wilson Chandler, and David Lee in 2005.
So I had a crazy story. So I was projected to go anywhere from 20 to 40. So there's 30 picks in the first round. And as you know, if you're picked in the first round, you're guaranteed to make the league. Outside of that, you have to still kind of earn your keep. As you're watching the draft, because really only the top 10 or 15 guys at the time would actually come to the Garden where they held the draft.
So you were home?
So I was home in St. Louis. I had my little watch party with all my family.
Oh, God.
So my family had written out like, okay, I know this guy's going first. This guy, I didn't know about this guy. So I'm like, oh my God, where the hell am I going to go? And then every time David Stern at the time comes up and he's announcing another team, you're like, this is where I'll have to live for the next 4 years. And so you just have no idea what team you're joining, what city you're going to. And I didn't have cell phone service. And so it's the final couple picks. But I didn't realize I didn't have cell phone service. And so it goes up in the 30th pick and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't gotten a call saying I'm being drafted. So I'm not even gonna be in the first round. And then David Stern announces 30th pick, New York Knicks select David Lee. And I'm like, wait, what? And so that was the first I had heard. Usually you get the call a few minutes before, hey, we're gonna draft you. You always see the guys laughing with their agent, high-fiving. I had no idea.
That's kind of cool.
And I'm like, this is so awesome. And then I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. Went to school in Gainesville, Florida. I had this 2-minute thing. Isaiah calls me, congrats, we're going to do this. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go play in New York City. Madison Square Garden, like the Mecca. And they say, we'll see you you have a flight tomorrow at 9 a.m. Your press conference is at noon. To meet the New York media. And I'm like,
what is going on?
So it all happens. It all really happens quicker than you think. And it's really just, I think as a fan, you sometimes look on TV and you're like, oh, this guy's always prepared for this. Oftentimes when you come to New York, it's going to be sink or swim really quick. So it's quite a,
and
quite
the
a big task
guys are so
ahead.
young when this happens too. Like managing any huge life change like that at that age is just crazy.
We had a cast of characters on that team. And I had Jamal Crawford is an all-time veteran. There was awesome guy, Malik Rose, who Philly guy who was great. Q Rich and I didn't always get along. He didn't love me, but that's okay. But no, he was another guy like you learn, you see these guys and how they work. And you got to learn a lot of what to do. And then also got to kind of notice some things, be like, yeah, I don't think that's the direction I'm going to probably want to take my career being a young guy. But I mean, it was also a different time then. You had all the guys with all the fancy cars and all this stuff. And you're in New York. And I mean, the wives with the fur coats and the whole thing coming to the game. Like it was a different kind of time. So cool to see. And once again, being a kid from St. Louis, I'm just like, what part of this soap opera am I playing? Like, but it was when I arrived, it was a lot of don't really speak unless spoken to.
Wow.
And then as you get to know guys, we'd play a little poker on the road, and that was my way to get to know a lot of the guys on the plane, to do that stuff, and got close with quite a few of the guys. But it was an interesting group, to say the least, and I got to learn a lot as a young player. So
yeah, they were a fun team. Like, it's almost, when you look back at the records, it's hard to believe that we didn't win more than we did, because there was electric moments in the early 2000s. I mean, you had Jamal Crawford had his 50-point game. Nate Robinson had his 40-point game. You had that insane triple-double where it was like 30, 20, and 10, right? Did you and 10 assists, I think? So there was moments. Allen Houston still early on had another 50-point game. So it was hard to believe that our record wasn't better, because I was having fun in the early 2000s. Like, I thought we were such an energetic team. Nate Robinson just being undersized, that's always a fun thing to watch.
Nate Robinson just being Nate Robinson.
Just being Nate Robinson.
That's an entertaining thing.
I always felt like you two could have had a podcast yourselves. Like, that dynamic always.
I wouldn't get many words in, though. I think we just keep talking. Nate was one of my favorite teammates. You also mentioned Jamal Crawford. Those Seattle guys were from a world of their own, and they were awesome guys. And but we had quite the cast of characters.
Yes.
And I think, to your point earlier, is there certainly was enough talent. It was just a matter of consistency. And then when you have guys at the end of their career, hard to keep guys on the court healthy also, and you got to see a lot of the progression of people's careers. And it's always how the NBA is, right? When there's new players coming in, there's somebody going out. And
there is a shelf
basketball
life
keeps
to
going.
this thing, to this body thing. It really is. There is a ticking clock at all times for, doesn't matter how hard you're working out.
LeBron would disagree, right? But for
everyone
else.
And then there's LeBron. Yes,
and then there's LeBron.
Yeah.
One of our first preseason games was against Philadelphia, and they had a pretty good team at the time. I think I had to guard, that's when they had Allen Iverson and Elton Brand, a couple of these guys. And I remember I was not a very good free throw shooter when I first got here. I think it was mid-70s, low 80s for my career.
You went up a lot.
Okay, I had to shoot a lot of them. So, but when you don't have to shoot a lot of them, it's even more difficult, because you're cold or you're coming off the bench. It's never easy. And I came in my first preseason game, and because they wanted to give the young guys a chance to play a little bit. And of course, everyone's excited to see Nate, and they said, "Oh, this guy's so short, but he's playing well." So I get out there and I get real aggressive, and I draw a foul, and I go up to shoot free throws. And I just bricked two of them, right? Not even close. So now it's in my head, go back. Right. So I think I was about 1 for 5 or 6. And finally some fan in the front row was like, "You need me to come out there and just shoot the free throws for you?" And I'm just like this. I'm like, oh no. So needless to say, I think, this is one of those things where, you see it all the time with the Yankees. You see guys that are 300 hitters, and they get there and they're either going to be a 320 hitter for the Yankees and rise to the occasion, or they're not going to rise to the New York occasion. So that was one of the times when I was like, okay, if it's the last damn thing I do, I'm going to become a good free throw shooter. Yeah. And made the adjustment and put the work in. So it's really motivating.
I remember looking at your stats at one point. 1 3-pointer in your career?
I'm telling you. So
what?
So you gotta keep this in mind, and this is my excuse. I was blaming
others. There's a different era. Different era. So it's not like it took 100.
Yeah, no. It wasn't 1 for 100. Right. Decision. No, but back in the day, you look at when I got in the NBA, and I was playing center, so I was guarding Shaq, Yao Ming, these guys. But also, even as a power forward, which I was most of my career, you had Kevin Garnett, you had Tim Duncan. You had Pau Gasol. You had all these Hall of Fame guys. None of those guys were 3-point shooters.
Right. No.
You walk outside and they'd be like, "Stop being soft. Get in, rebound, play defense, bang in the paint, and you better be able to finish and dunk on people in the paint." That was the mark of a real power forward.
Absolutely.
Right. And then it was only guys like Dirk Nowitzki and certain guys like that where you're like, "Oh, well, he's different because he's able to do that," and that's that's not really what most power forwards do, and they're different in that way. But
he's exactly right. That guys in that era, they were not expected to shoot threes. Plays were not designed for them to shoot threes. They didn't spread the court and put somebody in the corner. I'm just more curious. Do you remember when and where it came?
Oh, of course.
There you go.
We were up like 45 points against the Toronto Raptors when I played for Golden State. And the ball was swung to me, and I just caught it. It was nothing but net, absolutely. It was the best, easiest. And I was like, well, that was easy. And I think I tried it next game. I bricked it. I'm like, that'll be the last. And Steph Curry's looking at me like, "Why are you shooting this, not me?" And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'll just keep letting you
I'll get back in the paint.
Yeah, I'll get back. I'm going to go get a rebound. Thanks.
One of Lee's greatest Knicks moments came in December 2006. New York and Charlotte played 2 overtimes and were tied with only 1/10 of a second left on the clock. Jamal Crawford lobbed an inbound toward the basket, and Lee rose in the post to tip home the game winner.
That was just after the Denver Nuggets. What do we call it? We call it a brawl. Do we call it a
brawl? It was a brawl. Right?
Kerfuffle.
Kerfuffle.
So,
more than a scuffle, but less than a brawl. So
Right.
Yeah.
So what was left of our roster that wasn't suspended, we beat Utah when Utah had one of their best teams. Stephon Marbury buzzer beater. And then we go into the game against Charlotte in overtime or double overtime, was it? And so there's only 0.1 or what was it? Was it 0.1
seconds left?
Yeah.
And so technically you weren't supposed to be able to get any shot off, but it's in the past now and it counted. So we're just going to count it. But there was no way to catch it, outside or at the free throw line or anywhere and get a shot off. So I was supposed to go up and set a back screen. And then I was just supposed to roll to the basket and see if the defenders got mixed up. But looking back on the play, I'm not really sure why my defender followed me away from the basket anyways, because all I was able to do was tip the ball in with the time that was left.
Couldn't cradle it at all.
And Jamal just throws me a perfect pass. And it was one of those things I didn't think it would count. The crowd goes crazy, but just because the crowd goes crazy doesn't mean that they can't review it and see that.
Yeah.
And they looked at it and it counted, and I was like, what just happened? It was one of those plays that I thought was pretty cool in the moment.
Awesome.
But then to come back to the Garden now and people are still talking about that player saying I was at the game. By the way, I think I've had what is the Garden capacity?
20,000.
20,000. I think I've had 27,000 people tell me they were at that game. And I'm doing the math here. I'm like, I don't think everyone that says they were at the game was at that game. I was actually on the second row. I'm like, how many second row seats were there?
I remember the call like it was yesterday though. Like you were off balance. I remember Clyde saying like the game's going into triple overtime. He was basically like, there's no way that anything actually surfaces here. And then Gus Johnson, like mid-sentence, you roll to the basket. And he was like, well, it's got to be a tip into the basket.
I was watching the clock and him, and my immediate impression was, that's going to count. Even with your hand open. It just passed through your hand. And it was just awesome. Perfect. It was great. I still love it.
Thanks. I think it was complete luck, but
well, right place, right time.
Yeah.
Right place, right time.
That's what I'm going to call it. Right place, right time.
There we go.
I mean, to this day, at current games in the Garden, when you're there, they'll show that play on the jumbo screen, and the whole Garden gets so excited as soon as you see.
Well, it's because all of them were there.
All of them were there.
So they're just reliving what they were doing in that moment in time.
Like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
2009-2010 was Lee's final season in New York. He averaged more than 20 points per game and was selected to the All-Star team.
And you were our first All-Star since like Allen Houston, I think.
Yeah, two-time All-Star.
That was exciting because I feel like between Nate Robinson winning the dunk contest and you being there again in that decade when there wasn't a whole lot of wins, there were so many of those moments that were exciting.
We didn't have the greatest team that year in New York, and I think I was averaging 23 points, and I think it's leading the league in rebounding, and I didn't make the team. And I was so pissed. I'm like, here we go again. And they said, oh, you took somebody like the third best player off of whoever was first in the East. And I said, man, I can't believe this. And so I go out, I have a couple drinks. I was living in White Plains at the time, I was by myself, and I was going to fly home the next day. And I get a call like 8 a.m. and say, hey, this is David Stern. Congratulations, you made the All-Star team. I'm like, dude, who's messing with me now? And I hung the phone up.
Oh my God.
I hung the phone up. I'm like, who's messing? And then Jonathan Sopranowicz at the time was doing all the Knicks media stuff. Calls me. He's like, so you got the call? And I'm like, oh, that was really David Stern. I tried to hit redial and be like, so sorry, David. And Allen Iverson had sat out of the game. And so I was able to make it.
Yeah.
And I think the fans, there was a lot of pride for the New York community because they hadn't had an All-Star in a while. Once again, those are just little markers along the way of, all right, things are starting to head in the right direction. And, it was a cool moment to be able to really go represent New York, who hadn't been represented since Sprewell.
It was like a decade. Houston and Sprewell, I think, was the same year.
Sprewell and Houston were the same year, and it hadn't been since then. And what a cool thing to be able to go represent New York and to do that.
Yeah.
The Knicks are back in the All-Star game type of thing.
What would you say was the most electric moment at the Garden from your perspective in the 2000s?
I got a crazy one for you.
What's that?
You're not going to like it. Kobe's 60-point performance.
Absolutely.
Might have been one of the craziest.
Yeah.
It was one of the craziest memories I know I had. I know we were on the wrong end of it. But the backstory of that situation. So they called it Dream Week at the Garden.
Okay.
Boston came in first, and that's when they had Paul Pierce, Ray Allen the year that they won it. You had the Lakers on Wednesday, or wherever it was during the week. And then the last game was LeBron with the Cavs. And so all anybody would talk about the whole week in the media. LeBron's coming to New York. Fans need to show that they're supportive of LeBron, and everybody's. So Kobe hears this. I've become close with Pau Gasol, later played with them in San Antonio. And Kobe hears this and he's like, wait a second. You mean to tell me we're coming to New York to play and they're talking about LeBron? Like that's what everyone's talking about right now. Like we're the best team in the West right now. We're this. So usually Kobe, I would do the captain's meetings at the thing. And I was captain at the time and go up and it's Pau Gasol and Kobe every time. And you're like, hey, Kobe, hey, David, how's your family doing? Everything good? Nice to see you. We get up to the captain's thing and he's got like tears in his eyes and he's just like looking like this. And I'm like, like, hey, how have you been? Trying to make conversation.
Yeah.
Right? How you been? Just shaking his head. Won't say a word. I'm like, okay. Looking at Pau Gasol. Paul's looking at me like, I don't know what's going on here. So I go back. Mike D'Antoni's our coach. I said, Mike, man, I don't know what the hell's about to happen, but it's not going to be good. So Mike's a really fun-loving guy. And he goes, well, shit, David. I mean, he can't beat us by himself. So I go, whoops. I go, okay. So he gets the jump ball comes and he walks right in and makes a three. Then he makes like another driving layup. He's got like 7 points in the first few minutes. And coach calls a timeout. He goes, I may have been wrong. He might be able to beat us by himself. But I mean, and it just speaks on Kobe's character. And the Garden, to your point, electric. I mean, back and forth, because we stayed in that game for a long time. And you just look back on it and like the fans were just going nuts. And Kobe's shooting it from 2 steps inside half court and just looking at people. And he was so angry that they had given LeBron all this attention in the media. So it's a pretty crazy story.
Yeah.
So I was there for that game. I was one of the 27,000 for that game. And I promise you, this is going to sound crazy and after your story, I promise you there was a point in that game when I looked at the court and I looked at Kobe and I said, what I just saw in that man's eyes, he is about to murder us. I swear to God, I'll never forget it to this day. There was something in his eyes that I was like, I've never seen that in a player's eyes. And I never got to see Jordan play in person, but I'm sure he had that same look.
Oh, yeah.
But it was just a dagger from,
angry.
30 rows up. You could see it. And I said, we're going to be done right now. He's just going to go to the next level.
Just angry.
Yeah, the way that he could take that feeling and then just turn it into
positive action.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. We were lucky. We're definitely lucky that we got to witness that.
From a philosophical place, the idea, especially the world where it is right now, where everybody's got differing, philosophies and whatever, when you're in an arena like that, the feeling of it really is like one organism responding in kind to something that happens in front of your eyes. And it's like a really powerful and important feeling.
They say at the Garden, they say a lot of people speak internally. The PA announcer kind of brings the whole thing together.
Oh,
That's true.
That's how
Yeah, they say it's kind of like the key to the whole thing. Like Brunson, we can sub him out, but it's only
no, you can't. That's it. You can't.
The voice of the people you cannot.
There you go.
So cool.
I've had fun. I mean, I just, it's like playtime for me. I mean, after a while, it's the Pavlovian reflex. See this guy, see what he does, say what he does. And it's just a lot of fun.
Okay, so my question for you, have you ever had a name that pregame you're stressing over? Like on the opposing team where you're like, man, I hope this guy does not score because I have to, or foul anybody because I have to. And I do not want to butcher this on the air.
One of the funniest things that happened was with Starks. And his name wasn't hard, but
I was like, wow, that's a toughie.
Right. He was coming into the game. He was crouched in front of me, obviously. And Vitaly Potapenko. So he got fouled. So I go, okay, New York foul is charged to whoever. Vitaly Potapenko at the line, 2 shots. Starks turns to me and goes, it's Potapenko. I said, no, it is not Potapenko. You play, I'll talk. So
did you say that to him?
Yeah, he's a great guy. I mean, he's
Love
fun.
it.
And the only other one, John Wallace. Okay, going back.
Another easy name.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Starks and Wallace. I could have
No.
done that. I could have done your job.
So normally when a guy comes in, a new guy, we had just drafted him, right? And first preseason game. And usually I look at what the roster is going to be ahead of time. I say, how am I going to say this name? How am I going to say it? Some names come to me right away. And then John Wallace is in the game, right? He gets the ball in the corner and he's in the corner ready to take a 15-footer. And at that moment, as he's gathering, I say, holy schmagoli, I haven't even thought of how to say this guy's name. I friggin' hope he misses. And he did. Thank you, John.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my God.
And then I figured it out.
That's funny.
But
Some of these names, I would be saying a lot of Giannis again. I wouldn't even be
Yeah.
attempting it and getting something wrong. That
Number
wouldn't be right.
24 has scored the
yeah, no, it's just, I mean, I'm Polish, so it's that Eastern European thing. So,
Yeah.
you know, when you grow up speaking Polish and you try to read Polish with all the R, Z, C, Z, G, G,
Oh, yeah.
it's all piece of cake
Yeah.
after that.
Were you always a basketball fan when you first got this job?
I grew up with the Knicks from the mid '60s on, even pre-Frazier a little bit. My basketball career lasted about 6.5 seconds, but I really enjoyed the game. I appreciated it. And then when I went to college, I did play-by-play and stuff like that, and at Fordham. And then afterwards, I could have pursued the play-by-play lane, but I went into a different lane. With an outfit called Sports Phone, where you would dial a number and get
the
60
scores.
seconds, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I ended up being the director of that, and I spent 15 years. That's how I really cut my teeth. I used to cover games at night because we would actually put sound the next morning. You know, Knicks beat the Bucks last night. Such and such scored 20 points. I would go in the locker room and do interviews, and I was doing that from the mid 80s to the mid 90s. And then after that, John Condon, my predecessor, got ill, and they asked me in 1989, would you like to audition and for the job doing the prelim? So the prelim I got, I'm a Polish Catholic boy. The prelim I got was the Jewish Hebrew League championship. I didn't know it. Talk about names. So they were tough for me. So anyway, I got the job, and here I am.
Unbelievable.
I couldn't help but think if I had your power when they were like, and you just know that the call's wrong or it's against the Knicks, and you have to explain it, you'd be like, even by the tone of your voice, you'd be like, well, he thinks that this was a charge. I might think differently, but Knicks ball. Like have you ever thought of just like you're like stunned by a call and you can't even hardly make the call out
Or
loud?
reversing it yourself.
Yeah, you're like,
the ref says Bucks ball, and you're like, Knicks ball.
Not sure how he came to this conclusion. However,
Didn't
right?
somebody tell me to say that?
Fans, can you believe this?
I love it.
The appeal is denied.
By me.
No, I yes, I've been tempted, and there are some. A couple of this year too. It was just, what are they thinking?
Yeah.
But stuff happens. But no, got to be professional.
Yeah.
Got to do it the right way.
Keep the job.
There you go. There you go.
Mike D'Antoni arrived at the Garden in 2008, and in the summer of 2010, the Knicks landed a franchise-changing superstar to lead them into the next decade.
I saw it from then being an opposing player, but I mean, you could make the case that, Mari was when he got here, and people kind of didn't know what he would be like when he left Steve Nash and we did this. He had about as great of a year and a half to 2 years there as you can have. And then obviously Carmelo had an incredible career here, but those two guys, I think, and then, some changes in the front office, some changes really took and put the Knicks kind of back, headed in the right direction. But I remember watching and then having to play against when I came back, and Amari was like, I want to always come back and have a fun game back at the Garden. And then they're like, by the way, you're guarding Amari. And you're like, I think I'll have a little less fun, a little more focus here, because he was so tough to play against. And and so athletic. I mean, just very, very physical.
That image of him with like outspread arms when he decided to come here, I feel like that's ingrained in every Knicks fan.
Yeah.
You know, because that was a tough time to come to New York, and like you alluded to earlier, like it's a tough city to play and it's a lot of pressure. And I think that was a big step that we needed to turn the corner and really get in the right direction again.
You know, the 2000s started out with a team, the old team kind of fading away,
Right.
the 90s team. But the nice part was in the latter part of the 2000s, definitely D'Antoni and the players, team was back on the upswing at that point. And then, so I guess that might be the best way to sum that decade up.
I think the best way to sum it up is to say that it was definitely a decade in between the 90s teams and now leading to where we are today. But what makes it so interesting is in New York, it's always relevant, right? Whether you're winning, whether you're losing, whether there's drama, whether there's a great group of guys, a bad group, it's always relevant because basketball matters in New York, in the Garden like none other. It's pretty cool.
All 27,000 will be there.
There we go. I was happy to play a small part in that. That was pretty cool.
Well, now you know what the Garden was like in the 2000s, even if you weren't really one of those lucky 27,000. That's all we got for this show, but we'll pick up with Amari, Melo, and the Knicks tape era next time in the 2010s. This is The Garden Party. I'm New York Nico, and I'll see you on the next one.